She was just a diner owner, until she stood up to the police to protect a mysterious outlaw. The very next day, over 100 bikers showed up, turning her quiet roadside spot into a battleground of loyalty, courage, and unexpected family. This is the story of how one woman's fearless choice sparked a brotherhood that no one saw coming. The rain came sideways that night, slashing against the windows of Ray Mitchell's roadside diner like nature itself was angry. Highway 17 was a ghost town by midnight, and Ray was about to close up when the door chime rang. She looked up from behind the counter and saw him. Soaked to the bone, he moved like someone with a cracked rib and a conscience full of ghosts. His leather jacket clung to him, torn at the shoulder, one boot unlaced. A trail of blood kissed the tile behind him. He wasn't drunk. He wasn't high. But trouble walked in with him like a shadow with weight. Ray's instincts flared. You don't run a highway diner for 15 years without learning how to read men fast. He didn't speak. Just glanced up at her with eyes that had seen war, even if she didn't yet know which kind. She pointed to the booth in the back, near the kitchen door. Wordlessly, he sat. Ray poured black coffee, hot and bitter, and brought it to him without asking. She noticed the jagged bruise crawling down his neck, the way he winced when he reached for the cup. "Cop's coming?" she asked, her voice low. He looked at her for the first time then. Really looked. "Yeah," he rasped. "Less than 5 minutes." She nodded once. Didn't flinch. Didn't ask why. Ray had seen enough headlines to know black women rarely get second chances for the wrong kind of courage. But in her gut, she knew, this wasn't some gang thug on a spree. This was someone being hunted. So when the red and blue glow filled the windows and 2 state troopers slammed open the door like they owned the air inside, Ray was already standing in front of the kitchen door with her arms crossed. "You see a man come through here? Medium height, leather jacket, possibly bleeding." She blinked. "Nope. Just me, the rain, and a pie that's overbaked." One trooper stepped forward, scanning her, then the booths. "We've got reason to believe he came in here. Mind if we take a look?" Ray smiled, calm as a Sunday sermon. "Without a warrant?" "Yeah, I mind." The air turned electric. For a moment, the only sound was thunder splitting the sky in two. And Ray Mitchell did not move. The storm outside roared like a wild beast, but inside Ray Mitchell's diner, the tension was thicker than the rain-soaked air. The 2 state troopers stood stiff, their boots scraping against the worn linoleum, their eyes hard as steel. "We don't have time for this," the taller one barked, reaching for the kitchen door handle. Ray stepped forward, her voice steady, unwavering. "You said you don't have a warrant. That means you don't have permission." The trooper's jaw clenched, frustration simmering beneath the surface. "We have reason to believe a fugitive is hiding in that kitchen. This is a lawful search." Ray's gaze hardened. "Lawful or not, this is my property. You don't get to barge in because you feel like it." Her words hung in the humid air, a quiet defiance charged with an unshakable strength. Years of navigating a world that tried to silence her had forged Ray into a fortress of resilience. She wasn't about to crumble for 2 men with badges who thought fear could bend her. "Step aside," the second trooper growled, moving forward. But Ray planted her feet, arms crossed like a wall no one could breach. "Step aside," she repeated, this time with steel in her voice. "Or you're stepping over the line." A beat passed. The thunder outside crashed, a dramatic drumroll to the standoff. The troopers exchanged glances, a silent calculus playing out behind their eyes. They could force their way in, risk accusations, or back down. Then the taller one stepped back, hands raised, but his voice was sharp. "We're giving you one last chance. If he's here, it's on you." Ray's heart pounded, not from fear, but from adrenaline. She knew the stakes were high, not just for the man she'd sheltered but for herself. "Understood," she said quietly. The troopers stormed out, leaving behind the faint scent of rain and tension. Ray closed the kitchen door, her fingers trembling just slightly as she locked it. She wasn't naive. She knew this wouldn't be the last they came. But as she poured herself a shot of whiskey to calm her nerves, Ray felt a flicker of something fierce deep inside, a promise that she would stand tall, no matter the cost. Because some battles aren't just about laws or warrants. They're about standing for what's right. The storm had passed, leaving behind a wet silence that draped over Ray Mitchell's diner like a heavy blanket. The midnight rush was over, but Ray's mind was racing, tangled in the shadows left by the mysterious man who had vanished as quickly as he appeared. Her eyes darted to the kitchen freezer door, the place where she'd hidden him, behind crates of frozen fries and battered pie tins. Now, the cold hum of the freezer seemed louder, echoing the hollow in her chest. Ray opened the door slowly, half expecting to find him curled up in the shadows. But the space was empty. Instead, something caught her eye on the stainless steel counter. A silver chain, gleaming faintly in the low light, lay draped over a grease-stained napkin. At the end of the chain swung a small eagle pendant, its wings spread wide as if frozen mid-flight. Ray's fingers trembled as she picked it up. Beneath the chain, tucked under the napkin, was a folded note. The handwriting was hurried but deliberate, the ink slightly smudged from the rain or perhaps tears. "Thanks for seeing me as human." A chill ran down Ray's spine. She knew better than anyone how rare it was to be seen that way, especially when the world saw only headlines or assumptions. And then her eyes caught a crisp $100 bill beneath the note. Not a demand. Not a bribe. A simple, quiet gesture of gratitude. The man had left without a word, leaving only fragments of his story behind. Ray sat down, clutching the chain and note, piecing together the man's invisible history. His bruises whispered tales of fights she could only imagine. His silence spoke louder than any confession. Who was he? A fugitive? A victim? An outlaw? Or maybe something else entirely, a man running from a past that hunted him harder than the cops ever could. Outside, the first light of dawn crept through the diner's rain-speckled windows, painting the worn booths in shades of gold. Ray folded the note carefully and placed the chain around her neck, a silent vow forming in her heart. She wouldn't let the world's judgment define him. Not while he was still fighting for a chance. And maybe, just maybe, neither would she. The morning sun was just breaking over the horizon, casting long shadows across the sleepy highway. Ray Mitchell wiped down the counter, trying to steady her nerves as the coffee brewed, her diner's lifeblood in these early hours. But the usual quiet hum of routine was shattered by an unmistakable buzz. The hum of engines, dozens of them, growing louder by the minute. At first, she thought it was a passing group of bikers, the occasional wanderers who rolled through town like ghosts on chrome. But by the time she stepped outside, the parking lot was no longer empty. It was filling fast. One motorcycle roared past, tires throwing up sprays of gravel and dust, followed by another, then another, until the once empty lot was choked with over 20 bikes. Their riders dismounted, clad in leather vests patched with logos and symbols that told stories Ray didn't fully understand yet. A weathered man with a silver beard approached her cautiously, tipping his worn helmet back. "You're the woman who stood up to the cops last night," he said, his voice gravelly but respectful. Ray blinked. "I'm just trying to keep my diner open." The man smiled wryly. "Not anymore. You're something else." Inside, word was spreading fast. Trucker CB radios crackled with excitement. Biker forums lit up with tales of the diner owner who refused to bow to the law when they came looking for one of their own. "What's the big deal?" a curious local asked a waitress, as more riders filtered in. "She protected a man the cops were hunting. Some outlaw, they say. But outlaws got people who ride for them." By mid-morning, over 50 motorcycles were parked in tight rows, engines idling, exhaust smoke mingling with the aroma of frying bacon and strong coffee. Cameras appeared, local news crews eager for a story, neighbors pulling out their phones. Ray's diner, once on the verge of closing, was now the epicenter of a growing movement. The bikers weren't just here for a meal. They were here to show their loyalty, to send a message. As the diner's neon sign flickered to life in the morning sun, Ray realized her simple act of courage had awakened a fierce brotherhood. And the day was just beginning. By midday, The once quiet stretch of highway had transformed into a thunderous symphony of revving engines and roaring exhausts. More than 100 motorcycles lined the dusty parking lot outside Ray Mitchell's diner, their chrome gleaming like a silver river beneath the blazing sun. The rumble wasn't just noise, it was a statement, loud and unmistakable. Ray stepped out onto the cracked pavement, heart pounding as she took in the sight before her. Faces, weathered and resolute, turned toward her with a mixture of respect and gratitude. Men and women who had spent their lives riding the open roads, bound not just by the leather and steel they wore but by a fierce loyalty to one another. The man with the silver beard, the first to approach the day before, reappeared, this time flanked by a dozen others. "We're here to stand with you," he said, voice steady and full of conviction. "Last night, you didn't just protect a rider, you protected all of us." Word had spread like wildfire, and soon cameras from local news stations captured the scene, a diner surrounded by a sea of motorcycles, its owner at the center of a brotherhood she hadn't asked for but deeply earned. Ray felt a strange mix of pride and apprehension. She had stood up to the police out of sheer instinct, but now, the consequences were bigger than she'd imagined. The bikers were more than just a crowd, they were a family, and families don't forget those who stand for them. Then, as if on cue, engines revved in unison, a collective roar that echoed through the valley. It was a challenge, a warning, a vow all rolled into one. Locals gathered at a distance, whispering, eyes wide with disbelief. Some felt uneasy, others watched with awe. The police, meanwhile, stayed away, aware that this was a line they couldn't cross lightly. Inside the diner, Ray's staff hustled to keep up with the flood of orders. Coffee, eggs, and hearty breakfasts served with hands that trembled slightly but never faltered. Through it all, Ray stood by the window, clutching the silver eagle pendant she'd found, feeling the weight of every look, every engine's growl, every heartbeat that said, "You are one of us now." And with that, her world shifted forever. As the sun climbed higher, casting sharp shadows across the diner's weathered facade, a ripple passed through the crowd gathered outside. Engines idled and murmurs hushed as a figure emerged from the mass of motorcycles, a man whose presence silenced the hum of voices. He was Hawk, the outlaw Ray had sheltered the night before. His leather jacket bore the faded patches of a once feared biker club, his face marked by the hard lines of a man who had survived battles both on the road and within himself. The bruises on his neck were still raw, but his eyes burned with a fierce determination. With a steady stride, Hawk made his way through the crowd, his gaze locking onto Ray's. The diner fell into an expectant hush as he approached the counter, where Ray stood, clutching the silver eagle pendant that now hung around her neck. "I never thought I'd see this place again," Hawk said, voice gravelly but sincere. Ray met his gaze without flinching. "Why run?" she asked softly, curiosity breaking through the tension. Hawk sighed, glancing at the faces around him, his brothers and sisters in leather, all watching, all waiting. "I used to lead one of the toughest clubs on the West Coast," he began. "But I spoke out against corruption, against the things we'd done that crossed lines we swore never to cross. The law wants me silenced. My own people called me a traitor." A ripple of murmurs spread through the bikers, some nodding, others exchanging knowing glances. Loyalty was sacred, but so was honor. "But you," Hawk continued, "you saw me as a man, not a criminal. You stood up when others would have turned away." Ray's lips curled into a faint smile. "I don't believe in enemies. Just people who need a chance." Hawk's gaze softened. "Because of you, we're here. Not just to protect you but to stand with you. You reminded us what loyalty means." The bikers raised their fists, a silent salute echoing through the valley. For the first time in years, Hawk felt hope, not just for himself, but for a future where courage and kindness weren't weaknesses. Ray's diner was no longer just a place to grab a meal, it was a sanctuary, a symbol of something greater. And as the crowd cheered, Ray knew this was just the beginning. The days that followed felt like a whirlwind. Ray Mitchell's diner, once a quiet roadside stop struggling to stay afloat, transformed into a bustling haven alive with energy and purpose. The rumble of motorcycles had become a daily soundtrack, and the once dwindling flow of customers surged with riders and locals alike, all drawn by the story of courage and loyalty. Word had spread far beyond the small town. Online, videos captured the powerful moment when Ray stood firm against the police. Social media exploded with hashtags, #DinerQueen, #StandWithRay, and #RideForJustice, fueling a movement no one saw coming. Donations poured in from bikers, truckers, and strangers who believed in the cause. A GoFundMe campaign skyrocketed to 6 figures overnight, allowing Ray to renovate the diner. Fresh paint, new booths, and a mural that now adorned the largest wall. An eagle soaring high, wings outstretched, with Ray's silhouette painted boldly into its feathers. The community's attitude shifted, too. Where suspicion and quiet judgment once lingered, now respect and support flourished. The local sheriff, once wary and distant, paid a visit one afternoon, extending a handshake and a sincere apology for the officer's heavy-handed approach. "We're grateful for what you did," he admitted. "You reminded us all about standing up for what's right." Inside the diner, laughter and conversation filled the air. Hawk and his biker brothers often dropped by, sharing stories over coffee and bacon. They became part of Ray's extended family, a living testament to the bonds forged by courage and compassion. But it wasn't just about business or notoriety. For Ray, this was about reclaiming power, the power to define her own story, to protect those who couldn't protect themselves, and to create a place where everyone, no matter their past, could find refuge. Late at night, when the diner finally closed and the roar of engines faded, Ray would sit by the window, tracing her fingers over the silver eagle pendant still resting on her neck. This little piece of metal was more than a keepsake, it was a symbol of a new beginning, a legacy built on backbone and heart. Ray Mitchell's diner had been reborn, and it was stronger than ever. Months had passed since the night the storm rolled in and everything changed. Ray Mitchell's diner had become more than just a stop along Highway 17, it was a symbol of resilience, courage, and unexpected family. But what really mattered to Ray wasn't the fame or the bustling crowd. It was the bonds forged in fire and steel, a brotherhood and sisterhood sworn to protect one another no matter the cost. On a crisp autumn evening, the diner's neon sign flickered softly against the darkening sky, casting a warm glow on the gathering outside. More than 100 motorcycles lined the lot once again, engines humming in quiet reverence. Tonight wasn't about noise or rebellion, it was about gratitude and honor. Hawk, now a respected leader among his riders, stood beside Ray on the diner's porch. The silver eagle pendant gleamed around Ray's neck, catching the fading light. She felt its weight, not just in metal, but in the stories it carried. "We're here because of you," Hawk said, his voice low but steady. "Because you stood when the law wanted us down. You gave us hope." The crowd nodded in unison, faces illuminated by flickering lanterns and the soft glow from inside. Bikers of every age and background, united by loyalty and respect, formed a circle around Ray. Then, in a moment both solemn and powerful, Hawk raised his hand, his voice carrying over the quiet hum of engines. "We swear an oath tonight, to protect this diner, to protect Ray Mitchell, and to stand up for what's right. No matter the storm, no matter the fight." One by one, the bikers echoed the vow, their voices growing louder, stronger. Ray's eyes welled with tears, not from fear or anger, but from a profound sense of belonging. Her diner had become a sanctuary, a beacon of hope in a world too quick to judge and condemn. And as the night deepened, the roar of engines rose again, not as a threat, but as a promise. A promise that here, in this small town, loyalty and justice rode together, always. Ray smiled, feeling the weight of the eagle pendant, the bond of the brotherhood, and the fire of a new legacy burning bright. This was her story. Their story. And it was only just beginning. In a world quick to judge and slow to understand, Ray Mitchell showed us all that courage isn't about fighting alone, it's about standing up for what's right, no matter the cost. Her diner became more than a place to eat, it became a symbol of loyalty, strength, and the unbreakable bonds forged when people choose to see each other as human. Remember, sometimes the fiercest warriors come from the most unexpected places.